The text that we have for today actually goes on quite a ways, talking about specifically how to live, what not being foolish means. That's not really what I want to talk about. I'm just saying. The very beginning is where I'd like to stick with today. Be careful then how you live. How you live. Or living. Because that's the active part of it. That's what we are supposed to do. So there's this phrase or a proverb that goes like this: don't let life pass you by. I cannot find who first coined that. I've looked all over the place. Encyclopedias, Google, all these different searches have no idea who began that proverb. But it's important. Because in don't let life pass you by, there's something about not getting wrapped up in superficial things so much that you miss life going right in front of you. Don't let the real things of life sneak past. This can easily happen. Sometimes you talk about stuff to other people and you want to share some things, and it's more about you than it is about you. So it's more about me maybe than it is about you. Whatever. Sometimes we get so obsessed with jobs, whatever that looks like, that we forget to even out our time at our jobs and our time with our family. Totally forget it. We don't balance it. And we rationalize it somehow. We often say something like this: boy, I need to work that much because it benefits my family. Right? So we're trying to bring that in. And that's really a load. I mean, that's when you got to pull up the pants and say it's getting really deep in here. Okay? That's not true. When we put jobs in front of family, we're letting life pass us by. We miss smiles. We miss crawls. We miss runs. We miss shows. We miss lots and lots of stuff. We miss time. Sometimes we get more concerned about going out and partying that we miss the sunrise the next morning. Even though you may have gone to bed an hour before. And that may not be true for you all right now. But maybe it was. Really don't want to miss any sunrises. Not allowing life to pass us by is about placing value on the things that are intrinsic in worth. And ultimately not having any regrets at the end of life. So how do you know if you're in a rut of letting life pass you by? It's very, very easy. It just comes from a couple of sentences that you might say to yourself. Sound like this: if only I would have. Then you're letting life pass you by. Or you know that you did. The other one, I think, is if I could turn back time, I would have done this instead of that. We know that something was missed of intrinsic value because we want to go back and capture it. And I think that we all have these times. I think that a lot of us try to mask them and get rid of them and push them into some corner so we don't have to deal with them, because that means being real with ourselves and with other people. But I think we all have had these kind of things. But the question is now, can you learn from them? Or are you going to stay in a rut? Because ruts are terrible. Okay? They are awful. Ask anybody who's ridden in a buggy or motorcycle. That's it. It is terrible, terrible stuff to be in a rut. So in this short text that we had today, we hear concern about how we live. Then there's a bunch of specifics, like I was saying, but bottom line is be careful how you live, and if I were to retranslate some of this, it would be, by the way, make sure you run around with not that kind of church. Sorry. By the way, make sure you hang out with folks who have a good head on their shoulders. Duh! Isn't that what our folks always say? Run around with people who have a good head on their shoulders. Know who your friends are. If you don't want to bring your friends home, maybe you shouldn't be running around with them. Right? Make good use of the time you have. What does that mean? Love with abandon and live without any regrets. I've never heard anybody say, when I'm with them near the end of their life or when we're preparing for funerals, darn it, I loved too much. Never once. I've heard other things. Never heard that. And live without regrets. And then the last part is, if you haven't figured out already, the world can hurt. The world's tough. The world is really, really tough. So there's a special art to living. And it needs to be practiced and honed and then reworked and examined regularly. And this art of living was what Jesus exemplified. He exemplified it by loving all the time. And it was a selfless love, and it was a grace-filled love. Every single time. Selfless, grace-filled, even if it was tough. It was never about him. And then when Jesus teaches about interacting with others, he talks about it again being done with grace. Talks about it being done with accountability, which means it's not a free-for-all. You can't just go and willy-nilly do whatever you want. We're accountable to others. Others maybe in our homes, others who are friends, others at work. Have to be accountable. And Jesus said we need to also love the unlovable, including our enemies. That's hard work. And then Jesus teaches about forgiveness regularly. And Jesus says, forgiveness has no end. You know, and somebody says, well, his name Peter. Peter says, how about 77 times? As if, you know, how many fingers and toes do I have? And what happens if I lose count? Do I have to start back, right? Do I have to start back at 0 and keep forgiving? Jesus is like, no, it's just part of living. Because when we can forgive, when we forgive somebody else, we're actually taking the load off of us. We've released it. And we're free. Totally free. Totally free. Because we've let it go. And we're good with it. Now the other person, they may have other issues, and they can deal with that. But we're free. And then Jesus also speaks about priorities. And priorities, at least how Jesus enumerates them, and I think are true. God, number 1. Others, number 2. And yourself, number 3. But sometimes, in order to love God and love others, you need to be able to learn to love yourself. And somewhere in there is grace. But it takes practice in learning how to live that way. Days are hurtful. There is violence around us all the time. It's all over the place. We may not see it. It may be behind closed doors. We may just say, oh, it's over that ocean. No, it's around that corner. It's in that apartment. It was at that bar. It was going down that street. You know, segregation was supposedly outlawed years ago. I think that I could make a good argument that segregation is still around and that churches are the breeding ground. But churches have learned that it shouldn't be about race anymore. Sometimes it may be about sexual equality. But now, it's really about who we love. And people get segregated. And churches split. And people say you're not right. And they can't love. And we still have hate crimes. There's still trafficking of young people. There's still illness and food shortages. And we know that these days are hurtful. And that hurt in the midst of living is this real dichotomy. It's really dicey to be walking along this hurt and how Jesus asks us to live. It is very, very, very difficult. But true living in the midst of hurt means being honest, and that honesty begins with ourselves and all that we carry with our adventure in living. Because we carry stuff. Some of us carry a lot of stuff. What is it that impedes us from authentic and vulnerable relationships? Take it on for a second here. I do not want answers. If you want answers, we can talk alone. What is it that impedes your living a life of love with abandon from authentic and vulnerable relationships? What is it that we hide so deeply that we don't want to see anyone to see us? Because we believe they won't love us anymore if they see what we're hiding. What is it that we snuggle down deep and don't allow anybody to see? Because we're afraid we won't be loved. And where do you see yourself causing hurt? Where do you see yourself causing hurt? Probably not intentional. But where do you see yourself causing hurt? As people working every day and learning how to follow Jesus, the challenge is twofold. Challenge sounds like this: knowing what type of person we want to be, and then being that type of person that we want to be. First, we need to know what it looks like, and then we need to work and get there. But if we don't have the picture of what we want that life to look like, of living with grace and love and forgiveness, how can we get there if we can't see the picture? Living is love. That's part of the picture. Whatever that love looks like. Living is grace. Living is forgiveness. Living is striving for justice. Living is about being authentic and vulnerable with exactly who we are Living is about relationships, it's communal, and living takes care. The days are hurtful, and they're often filled with obstacles that we may not want to face. But Jesus says that the reason he has come is that you and I may have life, and life in abundance. Not a little bit, it's a lot. Living is an art, and too often we believe that we're the artist who makes everything happen. The fact is that you are the canvas, and God is the artist. And all that God asks is that we let him paint. Climb into the picture and open up.